Ang programang ito ay hatid sa inyo ng PSY-079, Module for Sensation and Perception. Tuturuan tayo patungkol sa mga pangunahing proseso ng pandama para sa mga taong manonood.
Good day everyone. Today we're diving into one of the most crucial senses, the vision. How do we see the world around us? It's not just about what our eyes capture, but how our brain interprets all those signals. Let's start by breaking it down step by step.
Sensation and perception. First, let's talk about sensation and perception. Sensation is a process of detecting physical stimuli like light. Perception, however, is the brain's way of interpreting these signals, essentially how we make sense of what we see. But how do we take light and turn it into a clear image? That's where the basic sensory process come into play.
Basic sensory processes. One key process is sensory adaptation, the ability of our sensory receptors to adjust to stimuli. For example, if you walk into a room with a strong smell, you'll eventually stop noticing it. Transduction is the next step, the conversion of light energy into neutral signals that the brain can understand.
Principles of perception. Now, let's move on to how our brain decides what to perceive. The absolute threshold refers to the smallest amount of stimulus needed to detect something. Think of it like the quietest sounds you can hear. Then, there's the different threshold, which is the smallest difference we can notice between two stimuli, like the difference in brightness between two lights. Also, we have the signal detection theory, which suggests that detecting a signal depends not just on the intensity of the stimulus, but also on the person's experience and expectations. And what about our perceptual set? It's the way our brain predisposes us to see things in a certain way based on the context and experience.
Let's talk about how light enters the eye. Light first hits the cornea, which bends the light to focus it. Then it passes through the pupil, the opening controlled by the iris, the colored part of your eye. The light continues through the lens, which fine-tunes the focus before hitting the retina at the back of the eye. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The retina converts the light into electrical signals, thanks to the tiny receptors called rods and cones. These signals travel along the optic nerve to the visual cortex of the brain, where they are interpreted as images. Ever wondered why the moon looks bigger near the horizon? That's the moon illusion, a fun quirk of how we perceive objects at different distances.
Neurons in the visual cortex. In the visual cortex, there are three types of neurons that help us process visual stimuli. First, simple cells detect lines and edges. Second, complex cells process movement and direction. Lastly, hypercomplex cells help us recognize more complex shapes. Together, they allow us to see depth, movement, and form.
Perceiving color. Now, let's explore color. There are two major theories that explain how we perceive color, the trichromatic theory and the open-net processing theory. The trichromatic theory suggests that our eyes have three types of cones that are sensitive to red, green, and blue light. On the other hand, the opponent processing theory says that we perceive colors in opposing pairs like red versus green, blue versus yellow, and black versus white. But what if you can see all colors? That's color blindness, where certain cones don't function properly, making it difficult to distinguish between certain colors.
Perceiving motion and depth. Motion perception is also fascinating. The background and the size of the object can affect how we see movement. For depth, we rely on binocular cues, like binocular disparity, the slight difference between what each eye sees. And there are also monocular cues, such as linear perspective where parallel lines seems to converge in the distance.
Our brain also keeps things stable through perceptual constancy. For example, size constancy allows us to recognize that a person walking is not shrinking, and shape constancy helps us recognize that the door is still rectangular even it is partially open. And finally, we process patterns and wholes through principles like similarity, where we group similar objects together, continuity, where we perceive smooth, continuous patterns, and proximity, where we tend to group objects that are close together. And the law of closure allows us to complete incomplete shapes in our mind.
Fun fact, vision isn't just about detecting light. It's about how our brain interprets all that information to help us make sense of the world, from color perception to motion, depth, and size. Our eyes work in harmony with our brain to create a rich and detailed picture of our surroundings. Joining this exploration of the eyes and vision, remember, the world looks a little different when you understand how it's processed.
For the summarization, vision is a complex process where light enters the eye and is converted into neural signals. Key parts of the eyes, like the cornea, pupil, and retina, focus light and send signals to the brain, which processes them through specialized neurons to perceive shapes, movement, and depth. Color perception is explained by trichromatic and opponent processing theories, while motion and depth perception rely on binocular and monocular cues. Perpetual constancy helps us maintain stable views of size and shape. The brain organizes visual information into patterns, aiding in the interpretation of complex stimuli, deepening our understanding of the world.
Just a quick reminder about the importance of taking care of our vision. Our eyes are essential for so many daily tasks, and protecting them helps ensure a lifetime of clear sight. Remember to practice good habits like taking breaks from screens, wearing protective eyewear when necessary, and scheduling regular eye checkups. A little care today goes a long way in preserving your vision for tomorrow.
The physics of sound and the psychophysics of viewing. Amplitude, or the height of the sound wave, determines what we perceive as loudness. The taller the wave is, the louder the sound. Frequency is what we perceive as sound's pitch. The higher the frequency, the higher the pitch. Purity, it is the complexity of the wave. Ear collects sounds and turn it into messages for our brain to interpret. There are three sections of our ear: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer ear are made up of pinna and ear canal. They gather the sound from the environment. The middle ear takes sound and turns into vibration. Sound that comes in the middle ear hit the eardrum, cause it to move. Eustachian tube help the eardrum to work well by keeping the air pressure balanced on both sides. When the eardrum moves, it makes three small bones called ossicle vibrate. The vibration then set into the inner ear. It receives vibration and changes into messages that go to the brain. These messages are called nerve signals. The inner ear is made up of cochlea, vestibule, which include semicircular canal. The cochlea has fluid in it that moves like a wave. This happens when the vibration comes in from the middle ear. Semicircular canal also use moving fluids to create nerve signals that help balance the signals from the cochlea via travel along auditory nerve. Signals from the semicircular canal go along the vestibular nerve. These nerves come together that lead to the brain. There, the brain decodes the signal to get information about sound and balance.
So generally, the sense of touch, or so-called the tactile sense, refers to the ability to perceive sensations like pressure, temperature, and texture. Also, the pain, through receptors in the skin sending information to the brain to interpret the physical qualities of objects we come to interact or contact with. Essentially, it is how we feel the world around us through our skin. In summary, the senses touch and pain are distinct yet interconnected sensory systems, as touch involves multiple mechanoreceptors detecting various mechanical stimuli, while pain relies on nociceptors signaling potential harm. Both systems involves complex neural pathways for signal transduction and processing, leading to conscious perceptions and reflexive actions.
Specialized sensory receptors, called mechanoreceptors, are in charge of identifying mechanical changes in the surroundings, including pressure, vibration, and stretch. The somatosensory system, which enables us to sense a variety of tactile sensation like touch, texture, and movement, depends critically on these receptors. Because they provide vital information about physical stimuli, mechanoreceptors, which are present throughout the body, but particularly in the skin, muscles, and internal organs, allow us to interact with our environment. Many people who have been lost a limb suffer from the complicated and upsetting condition known as phantom limb pain. The brain's processing of sensory impulses that are still produced after amputation is what causes the agony, not any physical harm to the missing leg. Even while the precise causes of phantom limb pain are still unknown, there are a number of treatment options that can help control the pain and enhance the lives of those who experience it, such as pharmaceuticals, neurotherapy, and psychiatric therapies.
Pain, while often considered unpleasant, serves a vital function. It acts as a warning system alerting us to potential or actual tissue damage. When tissue damage occurs, nociceptors transmit pain signals to the spinal cord and then to the brain. Several theories attempt to explain how we perceive pain. The gate control theory proposes that pain signals can be modulated by the sensory inputs. For instance, rubbing an injured area can sometimes alleviate pain by activating other sensory pathways, effectively closing the gate to pain signals. The neuromatrix theory suggests that pain is a multidimensional experience shaped by biological, psychological, and social factors. This theory emphasizes that pain is not only a direct response to tissue damage, but rather a complex interplay of various factors including emotions, beliefs, and cultural context. Chronic pain can have significant psychological consequences. It can lead to mood disorders such as depression and anxiety, disrupt sleep patterns, and contribute to social isolation. The psychological impacts can significantly impair an individual's quality of life. Fortunately, psychological interventions such as cognitive behavioral therapy can be effective in managing chronic pain by helping individuals develop coping strategies and modify their thoughts and behaviors.
The gate control theory of pain proposed by Melzack and Wall 1965 suggested pain is influenced by psychological and physiological factors. With a spinal cord containing a gate that regulates pain signals to the brain, it has also a psychological influences such as anxiety or fear that can also influence pain perception. While endorphins produced the body bind to opioid receptors in the brain, blocking pain signals and reducing perceptions and influencing emotional responses to pain.
Sense of touch is a complex sense that allows us to perceive sensation like pressure, temperature, and texture. It works by our specialized nerve endings or receptors in our skin detect various stimuli. These receptors send signals to the spinal cord and then to the brain, where they are processed and interpreted. Sense of touch is important for survival into heat and sharp objects. It is important also for social interaction like hugging and handshaking. Pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. It works by nociceptors or pain receptors in our tissues detect harmful stimuli. The importance of pain is to serve as a warning system, alerting us to potential or actual harm and prompting us to take action to avoid further damage.
Olfactory sensory neurons. These are the specialized nerves that responsible for detecting and transmitting information about odors to the brain, which can be found in the olfactory epithelium, a thin layer of tissue lining the roof of nasal cavity, which are the receptors of smell. These neurons contains the hair-like projection called cilia. The cilia helps in facing the surface area available for odorant binding and initiating the signal transduction pathway that converts the chemical information and odor molecules into neural impulses. For example, the harder and deeper you sniff any kind of food, the more molecule you vacuum up and the more you can smell it. So the process starts as you sniff the molecule up to your nose. Most of these molecules are filtered out in a way up to your nasal cavity as they get caught by your protective nose hair. But a few make it all the way at the back of your nose and hit your olfactory epithelium as they are able to bind an odor molecule to its receptor and initiate the signal transduction pathway.
Now, we're talking about olfactory bulb. It's a rounded mass of tissue that contains several types of nerve cells that are involved in the sense of smell. The function of this organ is to transmit olfactory impulses from the olfactory epithelium of the nose to the brain. But what happens if the olfactory bulb is damaged? A damaged sense of olfaction is severely disrupting. The joy of eating and drinking may be lost, and depression may result. But the question is, can it be repaired? There are no standard treatments for directly repairing the damage caused by post-traumatic olfactory loss, but I'll give you some tips of taking care of your olfactory bulb or your sense of smell in general. First, protect your nose from harmful chemicals. Second, avoid head injuries. And lastly, manage your sinus issues. And that's all for sense of smell or olfaction.
Taste buds are sensory structures located within the papilla on the tongue, soft palate, and throat. They contain taste receptor cells that detect five primary tastes: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. Each taste bud is made up of 50 to 100 receptor cells, along with supporting and basal cells. Example: when you eat salty chips, the taste buds in your tongue detect the sodium ions, triggering a signal to the brain to recognize the salty flavor. Papilla are small raised structures on the surface of the tongue that house taste buds and serve various functions, including taste sensation, texture detection, and grip for food. There are four types. Filiform, no taste buds help with texture and gripping food. Fungiform, contain a few taste buds found on tip and sides of the tongue. Circumvallate, large located at the back of the tongue, contain many taste buds. Foliate, found on the sides of the tongue, contains taste buds. Example: when you taste ice cream, fungiform papilla at the tip of your tongue help detect its sweetness.
The gustatory cortex is the brain region responsible for processing taste information. It is located in the interlaphantal operculum of the cerebral cortex. Example: when you eat a lemon, the sour taste signals are sent from your tongue to the gustatory cortex, where your brain interprets the flavor as sour.